So thank you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anna McDonald. I'm the manager of the Goodwill Workforce Connection Center in Lombard, and we are a free service to the community. We assist with helping people find a job. We help with writing a resume. If you need assistance with the online applications, we could help you with that. We have computers if you need to use a computer, and mock interviews, and we teach workshops, and we have hiring events too. So if you want, when you get registered with us, we could email you a list of our events every month, and then also text you job leads as well. So today we are here to talk about why I am not landing the job. So this is good information to have. And also, I guess maybe you might be joining this workshop if you're applying for jobs, maybe even having interviews, but not getting the yes. So the first thing that you really need, what we're going to talk about is a brief review of the resume, employer's perspective, few reasons to consider why you're not getting interviews, your behavior in the interview, what do we mean by you're not a good fit, and it isn't you. So you really have to be honest. Did you really prepare? And really preparation, and if everybody could put themselves on mute, I appreciate it. You can take yourself off of mute if you want to interrupt and have a question. I want this to be a dialogue, so please feel free to ask any questions you have. It doesn't really have to wait. We don't have to wait till the end of the workshop, but you really do have to be honest with yourself. Are you preparing yourself for the resume and for the interview? And you really need to take time. The first step is always taking the time to think about what you've done in your job. What are your skills? And it's really taking time every day to think, and you're thinking about your interactions that you've had with people. Are you talking to customers? What are those conversations? Are you talking to them on the phone, in person? Is it through emails? Are you interacting with other departments? Are you preparing reports? Are those reports on Excel? Are those reports on databases or QuickBooks? You're thinking about your behaviors. You're thinking about, how do I respond when I'm challenged? What are my triggers? How do I handle it when my manager is criticizing me or critical of my work, or I don't agree with them? Or how are you managing conflict? How are you solving problems? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? If you know your weaknesses, what actions are you taking to turn that weakness into a strength? Is it IT? Is it a particular database that's common in the industries that you're interested in? Are you talking to people who are knowledgeable if you're switching industries? Are you on LinkedIn talking to, you really have to think about everything. And all of this is falling into 4 buckets of transferable skills. It's either going to be a organizational skill, it's going to be a communication skill, it's going to be an interpersonal skill, and it's going to be a leadership skill. And some of these things are relative. For example, communication. You are conveying a message to a receiver, and that receiver is usually a person, which requires interpersonal skills. So some of it is relevant, but you really need to spend time every day just really thinking about it. And the purpose of this is everything's fresh in your mind. So when you have the interview, you could talk and give examples of, I've done this before and been successful. Let me talk about this. Or, and more importantly, to write the resume, because resumes are not a one size fits all. and you have, more skills than those 8 that or 10 that you might, put in a bullet point on your resume. So you might have a skill that you used, that, you need to take off of the resume and put that into this current resume for the position you're applying for. But it really all needs to be fresh in your mind, and you really need to be clear about what I've done in your brand, because you are selling yourself. You are a brand, and we're going to kind of talk about that in a moment. So really, honestly, did you prepare? Do you know, what you're good at, what you need to work on, your accomplishments, so on and so forth. And, the first thing that this attorney and negotiator talks about is, before you go into negotiation, take the preparation time that you need. And it really is a negotiation, this conversation that you're having with a recruiter or a hiring manager. And part of that negotiation is understanding their perspective, their need. You really need to understand what it is they're looking for. And it might not be clear on the job description. In the interview, though, you should be paying more attention to what is it what is the need that they have here, and what skills I have that I need to share with them that I've done this before and been successful. So it's really a negotiation. And part of that is understanding the perspective of the person on the other side of the table. So let's talk about, what is the employer's perspective? So the hiring manager, we're not talking about the recruiter. The recruiter is the person that's hired to go look for the people and then see, do they think that they have the skills? And once, they've sorted that out, they, call you, maybe do a phone screening and get a better feel for your skills. And then they present you to the hiring manager. The hiring manager is the person that is actually making the decision. Even though you might get along with the recruiter, you might not necessarily have this connection, with the hiring manager. So the hiring manager is the person making the decision. And what are they thinking? Why do you want to work here, right? And they ask you that question a lot in the interview, like, why do you want to work here? And I know that some influencers on LinkedIn feel like that's a condescending kind of question, but it's a good question. I mean, why? Why did you take the time to, fill out the online application? What is your motive? Is it you really believe in the brand? Is it just a job with good pay? Is it the position? Maybe this company is the influencer in the industry and you just want to be in the room, and that's okay. But why? You really need to think about that, because that's your motivation to get out of bed in the morning to go to a job. And if it's not the right motivation, you're not going to bring your A game. You're just not. And so when crises arise, problems have to be solved, it's that motivation that gets you out of bed to go and give that 100%. So you need to figure out, why do I want to work for this company? And again, there can be many reasons. Can I manage this person? Of course, they want to know, is this person going to take instruction? Which is why they're going to ask those questions. How do you handle situations where you don't agree with your manager? And not like we're robots. And a good leader, they do want to be challenged, but it could be done respectfully, right? But can I manage you? Are you going to take instructions? Are you going to be difficult? Are you going to try to dominate me? And even maybe for a hiring manager that's insecure, they might be thinking, are they going to take my job? Right? People, we're human. We have emotions, we have insecurities. Is this person going to take my job? Do they really understand the role? Do you really understand what skills are needed to be successful in this job? And most likely, you've kind of conveyed that on your resume, but now they're going to probe more in the interview. And unfortunately, sometimes the company doesn't understand the role either, and that happens. And especially in this day and age when things are changing so quickly in the workforce, and since the pandemic, there are greater skills that are needed in positions that maybe weren't thought about prior to the pandemic. But they still have the same resume and still looking for the same skills, which the skills aren't needed right now. Maybe a different skill is needed. A good employer, and a lot of companies are doing this, is reevaluating the job descriptions. Are they current? So maybe, they don't understand. That's something we're going to talk about earlier. But in a good situation, do you understand the role? Are you going to be successful? Can you get along with the team? Will you disrupt the team? And that's really important, because maybe they have a team that works really well together. They don't want to throw somebody in that's not going to carry their weight, or a gossip, or a negative person, or try to dominate everybody. They really want to find out, are you going to fit in? And I, several years ago, I've been working at Goodwill almost 8 years. I remember I had an interview with a company and was chosen to go to the next step, and that was to meet with the rest of the team. And so there were like, I don't know, 4, maybe 6 females on the team, and they were asking me questions about, basically get along with people and managing difficult people too. And so I told them how I would handle it, especially, conflict on the team. And then I asked the team, how do you manage conflict? And their response was, well, we go to Mickey and she takes care of it, who was the director or the vice president of the department. And I'm thinking, so basically everybody gossips about each other, and then, they are passive aggressive and don't confront each other. And then they go to the vice president to manage all of the conflict, which is really counterproductive. So, ask those questions. If they're asking you, how do you handle, conflict, you need to throw it back and say, so how does the team manage conflict? You need to figure out the dynamics. But, they want to find out, how do you work with people is basically what they're saying. Do you know your role? Are you going to do your job? Are you reliable? Are you going to call in sick? They might be probing to see if you have children. It happens. So when they ask that question, you just want to say, I don't call in, and I do schedule, I follow the protocols to schedule my pre-planned vacation time. But they're trying to see, are you, going to show up and do your work? Which goes back really kind of to that question, is it the right role for you that you want to do? Because people that are in roles that they don't like, we have habits of calling in because we're stressed out, and having panic attacks because we're going to a job that we hate. So you need to, think about that question, why you think they're asking that. Will you represent the brand well? They might be asking this in different other ways, but basically what they're trying to figure out is, who are you outside of the organization? And think about social media and all of those situations that we see about the Karens, the people that, away from work, they're kind of revealing who they are, and they're, people with phones, or, recording, fights that they're in, or their biases, or posting. Maybe somebody's posting something on, Facebook or social media that's revealing their biases. So companies, they cannot fast enough pull that information down. I mean, you represent that company, and even though you might not be saying something about the company, people in the community are going to find who you are, where you work, and put pressure on that company. So, they are concerned. Who are you outside of the work time? Are you going to represent us? Because we are not in 9-to-5 jobs anymore. We're just not. We reveal who we are outside of those 40 hours a week. So they want to make sure, who are you? What are your values and what do you believe? Do I want this person in front of the customer? Are you going to represent them well? Are they going to be embarrassed by you? Are you going to lie to the customer? Because maybe, they are an organization that really believes in telling the customer the truth and not overselling. And so, or being rude to customers. Companies make money from repeat business of customers. So we need our customers to have a good experience so they come back. And if we're not giving them as employees good customer service, they're just not going to come back, and we're losing business to the competitors. So how are you in front of that customer? And will you stay with the company? So a lot of companies, they do want their employees to stay, and they want to nurture them, and they want them to grow in the organization. And it's a lot, they're investing a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to hire somebody. And then if they hire this person and they leave, they say 30% of that person's wages within that first year, if they leave, goes back to then having to hire another person. You're paying for overtime, you're paying for stress on the team, you're paying again to advertise the position. So there's a lot of money that goes into it. So they want to know, are you going to stay with the company? And I've been in interviews before where they actually said to me, are you going to give us 2 years? So these are some of the things that the hiring managers are kind of thinking about when they're talking to you. And you need to spend time thinking about why I want to work here, giving examples of valuing customers and being a good team member and being reliable and really representing the company well. In the interview, the employer is looking at the resume and they're thinking, is this candidate lying about their skills and their work history? And I've been in interviews before, or I'm sorry, not interviews, but I've taught workshops before where people have told me they lied about their skills, or being frustrated because they know people that keep lying about their skills and getting the jobs. And here they are being honest and they're not getting the ask. So you don't want to start a job setting up yourself to fail. Either you have the skills or you don't. And most likely you're not going to be happy if you have to go in with a lie. And furthermore, if you get caught in the lie, legally the company can fire you, because when you sign an application online or a paper, there's always a paragraph in there about you're signing that everything is accurate and truth. And I've known people that have started a job and been in the job 6 months lying about their skills, and then they get caught and they're fired from the job. So be honest, just be honest about your skills. Is the candidate lying about their education? Of course, that could be found. I mean, they might ask for your transcripts. Are you exaggerating your accomplishments? I think sometimes we could tell people are exaggerating, but you know what? You can have so much more self-confidence in your accomplishments that you've done. I don't understand why people feel like they need to lie, but they do. And what would the previous employers say about you? And it seems like every other interview I've been in my life, they've always asked me, what are 5 words that your manager would say about you? Or if I were to talk about them, what would they say? So, if you have a good relationship with your former manager or current manager, ask them. And you could kind of tell maybe on performance reviews, or maybe just little comments here and there that you're not really paying attention to, they're actually compliments. So ask your colleagues too, not just your manager. Ask people that you've worked with before, what was it like to work with me? What do you think are my strengths? And always you're going to find that the strengths that you think you have are not really your strengths, but that people see something, greater and better, or maybe something you need to work on. So, ask. So according to this book, the two traits of all hiring managers, the two traits all hiring managers look for during interviews without even realizing, says that the candidate has to be both able to do the job and someone you'd want to spend time with, right? So that's really kind of a big part of it too. You've got to the interview, you're talking to somebody, so they kind of think you could do it, but can I work with this person 8 hours a day? And, I had a manager, one of my managers use me as a reference once, and the hiring manager for this company called me. I told her what I felt about my manager, and she was a really good manager. I got along well with a lot of people. And, so I'm going on, and this hiring manager says, just stop. This is my situation. I have this other person that I really want to hire. That's a go-getter. I know she's going to excel. I don't have to teach her the database. She's going to do excellent. Your former manager, I do have to train her on this database and, a few other things, but I really feel like people are going to get along better with your former manager than this other person I want to hire. I think she's going to be more welcoming, more approachable, and it was an HR position. And in HR, you have to have, an approachable personality and get along with people. And so the manager who had to be trained in, some of the functions was hired. So, it kind of comes down to that. You could be trained if they feel like you could be trained, and you have greater behaviors and actions than the other person, they're probably gonna hire you. So it really kind of does come down to if, can I get along with this person? Leading into what's a good fit, right? We hear that a lot. We didn't get the ask because we weren't a good fit. So what does that mean? So what does a good fit mean? It could mean a cultural fit. Cultural fit is a likelihood that a job candidate will be able to conform and adapt to the core values and collective behaviors that make up the organization. Or it could be just chemistry, the term used to explain how employers perceive you and what they think about your personalities. And so, yes, every company has a culture. We call it the politics. It's, the language we use, how things are done, what's acceptable and what's not. And you need to figure out that culture too. And you're probably like, well, how do I figure that out? Well, many ways. So one is going to the website. The website's going to tell you a lot about the culture of the company by the words that they use. And also that's where you're going to find the value words or guiding principles of the company, right? This is how decisions are made. So, if their value words are, we respect our customers, or we value our employees, or we value confidentiality, honesty, and integrity, then those are the questions that they're going to ask in the interview. They're probably going to ask you a lot of questions about, tell me about a time when you were told to lie to a customer, or how do you treat a customer? So that kind of gives you some insight into, how people are treated, how decisions are made. So, for example, maybe their value word is confidentiality, and they're an IT company, using Apple as an example. So Apple, I believe, has the word confidentiality as one of their value words. So, when they're hiring people, they're going to hire somebody that understands the value of confidentiality to their customers, right? many years ago, there was a terrorist attack, and the terrorist had an Apple phone, and the powers that be could not access that phone to get information. And so they went to Apple and asked them to get them in, and Apple says, we can't, yes, it sounds horrible because it's a terrorist and we need to get to the bottom of, who's involved and actions. But their value word was confidentiality. And what does this mean to our customers, about how we keep their information secure? Apple, yes, has all other issues, but, it was an example of them saying, okay, we're not going to cross this line. And I believed it was resolved another way. There was some legal actions taken, but it's an example of this is what we believe. There's other ways that you could find out the culture of the company, and that's just how you're treated in the interview, through that interview process. So if you're talking to somebody and they say, we're going to call you on this day, and they don't, or, companies like Walt Disney, Ben and Jerry's, they lay it all out for you on their website about this is what you could expect in the interview process. And like Ben and Jerry's makes it very fun. Of course, at the end, you get a pint of ice cream every day. How fabulous is that? Excuse me, but they kind of show you. So it's a kind of an example of like Ben and Jerry's. Well, it's a really fun kind of graph, and I meant to put it on here because I show it in other workshops. But they're quirky, it's fun. That's the culture there. For other companies, it might be more stiff. And if you've got to go through many layers of interviews, there's 5 interviews and there's like 20 people that interview you. Well, that's how decisions are made. And that could be expected if you're hired for that company. Things are not going to get done fast because there's many layers that you have to go through to get something done. And is that frustrating for you? Do you want something more laid back? If they say their value word is we value our employees, then you need to ask them. Your value words are, employees. Give me an example. How are employees valued? So, another way to find out the culture of the company is the layout of the organization or the actual environment and campus of an organization. So if their value words are innovation and we, value creativity, how do they do that? How do they set up the space to allow people to be creative and innovative? And with that comes failure, because not everything's going to work. So if you're saying that we're supposed to be creative and innovative, and at times you're going to fail, how are we treated? Is that valued? Is that acceptable? So there's always kind of figure out the culture of the company, and of course asking people. You could always go into like Indeed and look at comments, and some comments are going to be honest and others are just disgruntled employees that may have been their own worst enemy. So you got to figure that out. So a good fit is, are you going to fit in with the company? If we say that we value customers, do you really understand the value of customers? And are you going to, go against or, go against that customer or lie to them or mistreat them? So they're going to ask you those kinds of questions. So you need to figure out, what are my values? What's important to me? That's part of that beginning of this process that I was talking about too, is you need to figure out, what environment do you thrive in? What are you looking for from a culture? And what are your values about work? And is it aligned with the companies that you're working for? Because you're only going to be frustrated in some of these cultures, and it's just not going to be a good fit. And, kudos to you if you get an offer and feel like I'm just not going to thrive here. And I already see the frustrations and then walking away. So think about that. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, we'll move on. How will the employer determine the good fit? Again, they're going to ask behavioral questions, right? They're going to look at your qualifications and skills. And behavioral interview questions are questions about specific situations in your past and how you handled it, because what you've done in the past is how you're going to do it in the future. We don't change, and companies don't exist to hire somebody and change their behaviors. They're going to hire you for your current behaviors because it's aligned with what they're looking for. And it's impossible to change people, right? Just think about your personal relationships. You cannot change people. This is who we are. We can only change ourselves. And so they're not going to hire you to make you believe in what they believe in. And they're going to ask you questions to kind of figure that out. So one of the questions might be, describe a situation where you and a colleague whom you relied upon for support were in conflict. How did you address the situation? So the value of the question to them is, they're probably talking about, if you've seen on the job description, we need a team member, right? We need team players. So now they're going to probe to see, how are you a team player? Are you the person that starts the conflict? How do you, are you passive aggressive? And so the value of the question is unearthing, the candidate's conflict resolution abilities. It may also illustrate how flexible the candidate is in adapting their expectations or behaving with humility to achieve a greater organizational good. And a lot of assessments too, they, the ones that, they ask you the question and you could have to say most likely, least likely, or in the middle. Never answer the most likely or least likely, or in the middle, neutral. It's either somewhat likely or somewhat unlikely, because it shows your ability to not be flexible if you are most likely to do this or that. And what they're looking for is people that are flexible, that you have to change sometimes. And so, they're wanting to know your flexibility as a person and your adaptability to situations and your behaviors. So if you're in conflict with somebody, are you most likely to be that person to, put your foot in the ground and not move? And not, but maybe you're the one that started it. There has to be accountability, right? The next one, provide an example of a difficult situation with a major client that you had to resolve. What steps did you take? What was the outcome? So the value of the question, it exposes the candidate's advanced customer relationship management skills. Are you a problem solver? It also reveals how well they connect the dots between a problem and the outcome. Even better, if they can measure the results, articulate their resolution contributed to the long-term gain. So, they're looking to see, do you have problem solving? Do you see the big picture? Are you able to somehow sort out this situation, figure out what, where it began, and then resolve it? That's like the STAR approach. When you're answering a question in the interview, you always have to set up the situation. That's the S or the T or the task, setting up the story. The A is for your actions, what you did, and then the results, because we always have to learn something from, all of our interactions. And, it was a result that we realized we needed to provide greater training, or we miscommunicated. So what actions did we take to make sure it didn't happen again? And that's part of that results process. So then, so let's think of the reasons why we're not being hired. And some of it could be very simple, right? It might just be our appearance, right? Or appearing disinterested. So a career builder survey stated out of the hiring managers that, were the decision makers, 55% of hiring managers didn't hire somebody because they appeared disinterested. And that can mean many things. That could, we're still hearing people, bringing their phones into the interview and answering their phones or texting during an interview. That's appearing disinterested. Another way that you could appear disinterested is if you're just not answering the question and you're not engaged in a conversation and you're making it more of an interrogation. They ask a question, you respond, we go back and forth, make it a conversation that seems like you are paying attention and interested in really, doing the job well, or maybe there's a problem that they have to solve, or, appearing, interested about who's the team and what are our goals and what are we trying to accomplish and how I can help. Dressing inappropriately is still a big issue, believe it or not. I had a HR director for a school district telling me that teachers are coming in wearing very revealing clothing. Of course, they're not going to get hired, especially if you're working, in a high school with a bunch of teenagers. So dress appropriately. It's, men wear, nice pants and a nice top and a tie, and females, even a dress, slacks and a jacket is fine, or a skirt at the knees or below, nothing above the knees. I had a recruiter tell me once too that she was hiring mechanics, and she said she had an interview with some guy and he was coming from his other job and he was all greasy and yucky. And yes, that's to be expected for mechanics working on cars. But she's like, he'd even go home and take a shower and put on a different shirt because he gets grease all over her desk and his chair. So appearance is important. And again, can I put you in front of the customer and not be embarrassed? Talking negatively about a previous employer, that's a big no-no, because that's your behavior. So if you're talking about a previous employer, this is what you're going to do about us, right? You're going to go on social media, make comments, or disrupt the team. So, maybe you did have a valid reason to be disappointed with a former employer, and maybe they were jerks. But you still have to turn around and make it a positive response. Providing, not providing specific examples, 33%. That's what the value of getting ready for the interview with the mock interviews and taking time every day to think about your job, because you do have to give examples. It's not a yes or a no, exchange in questions. You back it up. Yes, I've done this before. Let me show you, if you got statistics, if you got numbers, those are all the bells and whistles they want to see. Show them with a story. Providing too much personal information. Don't go into the interview saying, I can't do this because I can't lift or I can't sit. You should be applying for jobs that you could do. They're telling you on the job description, you have to lift 50 pounds. You have to lift 50 pounds. Excuse me. Oh, some water here. So don't tell them about a previous sickness. Don't tell about your children being ill. And I think some people do that too, because in the job, while you're applying for the job online, there are the EEOC questions about disability, gender, or race. Excuse me, I have something in my throat. And so they see those questions and think it's the employer asking when it's really not. So these online applicant tracking systems are designed to ask these equal employment opportunity commission questions that employers at fall of every year have to provide employers, or the EEOC, the employers have to provide the EEOC with questions about how many females they interviewed, how many males, how many, people that apply for the job are veterans or veterans' wives, or, are Black or white or Asian. And they collect that information for the purposes of, labor statistics, and also if, there is a investigation into employers that are, participating in unethical behavior and illegal behavior. So because those questions are asked, and you should know that the company doesn't have access, so that when you're applying, that information is kind of separate from your application. So the hiring manager doesn't see that. And so you not knowing that, people might say, I have a disability. So you don't want to provide any information about a disability. Other reasons to consider, you maybe didn't get the job or the ask because you come across as a know-it-all or intimidating to the hiring manager. They just don't want to deal with it. Recruiters and hiring managers are sometimes incompetent interviewers. It just happens. And good companies talk about, good culture. They're going to train their hiring managers on how to ask interview questions to make sure that they are following the laws and that they're fair to every candidate. So maybe they're just bad interviews and asking stupid questions. I know I've been in interviews where, I was asked, what kind of, what table did I sit at when I was in high school? So they're trying to figure out, am I, the cheerleader, or I'm the goth, or, who cares? That was like 30 years ago. Hopefully we've changed, right? We're not those people. But it's just stupid. They ask dumb questions. Let's just say it, right? So that's no fault of your own. It was just a bad interview. And I wish, in the past, when I was in those situations, that I would just stand up and walk out because it wasn't going anywhere. It was a waste of time. So yeah, it happens. We know it, right? Unfortunately, hiring managers make decisions based on personal biases. It happens. People do make decisions based on race, gender, age, ethnicity. Again, that's a reflection of the company hiring jerks like that or approving that kind of behavior. It happens. So, I mean, you got to make the decision if you want to take legal action or not, but it does happen, right? The company doesn't have an idea about skills needed to succeed. The position really is needed or not, and shouldn't exist anyways. I mean, I've been in interviews where I ask questions, like one of the interviews I had, I asked questions, it talked about grants. And the woman said, well, you're not gonna be working on grants. That's like 25% of the job, but you're not working on grants and you have a job description that says you're working on grants. So, they don't have any idea, and they're not changing their job description to actually match, what this person will be doing. Maybe they hired an internal candidate. Maybe everything went right, but they just wanted an internal candidate, and that's fine. Those are the companies you want to work for, that they reward hard work and see the value of their employees, and they're going to give them raises or advancement. Maybe you just didn't do well. Maybe you just didn't do well in the interview. And that's really, you need to evaluate every interview and figure out, did I do well, and be honest. Did you really, did you really practice? Were you stumbling on a question? Did you get nervous? And nervous is fine, but if it gets in the way of you actually sharing your skills, then that's an issue, right? But be honest. Did you practice? What did you do wrong that you feel like you did wrong? And if you could get feedback, that's even better, but most likely won't happen. Reevaluate yourself and then just do better in the next interview. I mean, spend a couple hours thinking about it, change your behavior and move on. Did you talk too much and you didn't use the STAR method that I was talking about, where you're setting up the story, you're talking about your actions and your results? Or did you lack self-confidence? I mean, that's really a big part of getting through the interview too. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment. Did you take your personal issues into the interview space? Did you overshare? Maybe you gushed about how this is your dream job. You know, yeah, you could do that. You want them to know you want to work there, but you also don't want them to think that if they don't hire you, it's the end of your world either, because that puts them on the spot. Did you come across as too desperate? You stated or acted like you would take just anything, you know, to get the job, that you needed a job. So don't be too desperate either. If you make it seem like the hiring manager is, if you make it seem like hiring you is a big favor, you know, like you're the it and you're going to come in and, you know, help them because they don't know what they're doing. You know, that's the arrogance part of it too. What missteps are you making? Some other ones. Common reasons people don't get hired: they're not preparing for the interview. It's obvious to the employer. You're not demonstrating that you've researched the company. What's their mission, their values, their brand, their audience, their industry, their competitors? You might not need, you know, competitors or audience, but you definitely need to know the brand. You know, what are they doing there? And even for entry level positions, I had a hiring manager once tell me, you know, they were hiring just people to work in a linen service company. It was, you know, where they were actually cleaning the linens. And she said everybody that came in had no idea what they even did. So she thought that she would, you know, when she's setting up the interview, that she would send them a link to the company's website and some other information that, you know, kind of a nudge, you know, read about us, know what we do. And in the interview, people were not still doing that. And so she said that she was really frustrated. She didn't hire anybody that came in. And then the last person that came in was dressed really sharp. He had a nice suit on for this entry-level position and seemed to have a good kind of image about him, a confidence about him. And she says, this guy has got to say something really wrong not to get offered a position. And so he comes in, sits down, she asks him a question, and automatically he's talking bad about the previous employer, like bad. So, you know, it does demonstrate to the employer that you know what about the company, what you're there to do. Because, you know, in the interview, there's always going to be two questions that they ask at the top of the interview. It's either, what do you know about the company, or why do you want to work for us? Think about all the interviews that you've been in, and one of those questions were asked right away, right? You know, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work here? What do you know about us? Very basic, and you should have a response for all of that. Not making a distinction between you and other candidates. You want to be better than the next candidate. So, you know, especially like on the resume, right? On the resume, people have the objectives. And everybody uses the same one, where I'm a go-getter, I'm a team player, I'm results driven. How are you better than the next candidate if you're saying the same thing they are? So you need to stand out somehow. And that's, you know, showing your skills, give them examples. Not showing interest or enthusiasm in the role. Be passionate about it. Again, why do you want to work there? not asking questions during the interview. You really have to ask questions. You should have 3 questions to ask. Why is the position available, right? Is it you're wanting to find out, is this a revolving door? Is this a stepping stone to another position? Is it a brand new position? Is it a grant position if you're working in a nonprofit? Why is the position available? What skills are required to be successful in the interview? You know, and that's another way for you to figure out, you know, what specific skill are they looking for if you haven't already figured that out, and then giving them an example of having that skill and being successful. What do you think are the challenges in the position, right? You need to know what you're up against. Maybe the challenge is funding. Maybe the challenge is, you know, the team. Maybe, you know, and maybe you might just kind of figure out without asking that the challenge is working with this person, because maybe they're just a jerk. See, some questions, these might not be useful for every situation, but you definitely have to be asking questions. What you must convey by the end of the interview. So you need to convey by the end of the interview that you're able to do the job and start right away. If hired, you should start making an impact on day 1. If you're not able to get the hiring manager to imagine you contributing meaningful work on the first day, you haven't done a job, or you haven't done this very well in the interview. Make sure you connected the dots, you painted the picture of how you could be great in the position. You know, they might ask you questions like, what can you accomplish, or what do you think you need to accomplish in the first, you know, 30, 60, 90 days? And you need to think about that. You know, they want to know, are you thinking ahead? Do you have a plan of action? You've done it before, right? So what actions are you going to take? What are you going to, you know, take care of right away? But you can even ask them, what do you want to accomplish in the first, you know, 30, 60, 90 days? They want to know that you're going to fit in with the team. They want to know that you're going to know your job, you're going to get along with people, and you're going to carry your weight. You need to convey this by the end of the interview, that you're going to fit in with the team. You need to let them know you're enthusiastic about the job, you know, that you're not desperate, that, you know, this is what you're looking for. Some candidates overpraise the interviewer, and it seems like you're kissing up. So you want to be enthusiastic without, you know, kissing up. And remember, they want to know why you applied for the position with the company. Why them? When there's thousands of other companies that you can work for, why did you pick them? What recruiters are saying about why they didn't hire you? You gave me canned answers. You spent your time trying to read my expressions. When I said, how would you approach the problem? You jumped into a thoughtless answer like it was an exam. You told me about other accolades conferred by other people, but not one thing for yourself that you're proud of, and that's sharing those accomplishments. It is them. You know, it's not you. They're the ones with the issue, because maybe you've done everything right. So again, you have to remember the recruiter is working for the company, not you. And they have to carry out the request of the hiring manager. And the hiring manager, you know, just might be a difficult person to work with. But they don't know the position. Another reason might be, you know, how can they possibly hire the right person if they don't know the position? And again, like I said before, positions are changing really quickly because of technology. And so employers really need to kind of change the job description to make sure that they're hiring the right person with the right skills. The company decides to close the position. That might be another reason, you know, why. The offer was extended to an internal employee. consider perhaps that it was just a bad place to work anyways, but they're not going to get it right sometimes. If you can honestly say you're prepared for the interview and walked away, giving your best, pat yourself on the back, you did a good job, but also take time to reflect on the interview and recount what you did wrong. Change this behavior, do better in the next interview. Don't rehash over and over again what you did wrong. Learn from the mistake, change your behavior, move on. I want to take a little time to talk about the confidence and the arrogance, and what that difference really means. So according to a psychologist today, it's more about the emotional intelligence, right? And emotional intelligence is emotional awareness, or the ability to identify and name one's own emotions, the ability to harness these emotions, apply them to tasks like problem solving, and the ability to manage your emotions, which includes both regulating one's own emotions when necessary and helping others do the same. So why am I, talking about that? Is that we're talking about confidence and emotional intelligence. The core of that is your self-awareness, self-acceptance, and confidence ultimately. And in this new workforce, people have to really have, emotional intelligence to survive, because there's going to be more challenges, because and good employers now are realizing they need a diverse workforce. They need people to, with other experiences. And so if you're not a confident person, you're going to be challenged by this. If you're a leader, if you aren't self-confident and self-aware, you're not going to bring in people with other viewpoints and different life experiences to help solve these problems. And the problems are never going to get solved. Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. Part of being an inclusive environment is bringing everybody to the table. And for some people, that's threatening. But for somebody that has emotional intelligence, they welcome this. It doesn't make them feel less of a person. They thrive on this, and they don't feel challenged. So, you have to think about your emotional intelligence. What are your triggers? What do you need to work on? What do you lack confidence in? And those triggers are usually something from the past that, comes into this current situation. You need to figure out what that is. And beyond that, so yeah, the core of emotional intelligence is confidence, and then being able to regulate it, that, nobody's going to push your buttons, and even if they do, it's about reacting to it, right? You're not going to react to that. And then once you command this self-awareness and regulation, then you can manage other people, right? You have empathy for other people. And this is really important. And so this can be seen actually in the interview. So someone that is confident, they're a positive person, versus the arrogance of being just a negative person all the time. Of someone that's confident, they push above their fears, they take risks. But insecure people, they avoid a risk. It shows, it exposes them, and they don't like that. A confident person, they ride on criticism, they excel above it. But someone that's arrogant, they can't take criticism. Someone that's confident is humble, versus someone that's arrogant, full of ego. And so, you've got to convey your confidence in the interview. And part of that is really thinking about what you've done in the past, and how you've been successful and how you overcame it and what you learned and maybe even accountable for it. So really, I really encourage you to take time to think about your jobs and, spend time writing it down, and getting ready, for the interview. So let's just recap. Did you really reflect practice? Are you exaggerating your truth, overselling? Are you confident? Are you arrogant? Did you engage in the conversation and provide good examples? If you do bad or you do good, just move on. Don't take it personal. Learn what you can. You're eventually that door will open for you. It will. So does anybody have any questions?